and the reality of life in a world so often infected with evil, as personified by Hill's devil. Q. Aren't you a little hard on the schools and the churches? A. No, I am merely describing them as they are, without bias or prejudice. Q. Aren't the schools and the churches your bitter enemies? A. Their leaders may think they are, but I am impressed only by facts. The truth is this, if you must know it. The churches are my most helpful allies and the schools run the churches a close second. Q. On what specific or general grounds do you make this claim? A. On the grounds that both the churches and the schools help me to convert people to the habit of drifting. Q. Do you realize that your charge is substantially a sweeping indictment of the two institutions of major importance which have been responsible for civilization, in its present form? A. Do I realize it? Man alive, I gloat over it. If the schools and churches had taught people how to think for themselves, where would I be, now? Q. This confession of yours will disillusion millions of people whose only hope for salvation is in their churches. Isn't that a cruel thing to do to them? Wouldn't most people be better off living in the bliss of ignorance than to know the truth about you? A. What do you mean by the term, salvation? From what are people being saved? The only form of enduring salvation that is worth a green fig to any human being is that which comes from recognition of the power of his own mind. Ignorance and fear are the only enemies from which men need salvation. Q. You seem to hold nothing sacred. A. You are wrong. I hold sacred the one thing which is my master, the one thing I fear. Q. What is that? A. The power of independent thought backed by definiteness of purpose. Q. Then you do not have many people to fear. A. Only 2 out of every 100 to be exact. I control all others. Q. Let's give the churches a rest and get back to the public schools. Your confession has shown clearly that you thrive and perpetuate yourself from one generation to another by the clever trick of taking over the minds of children before they have the chance to learn how to use their minds. I wish to know what is wrong with a public school system that permits the devil to control so many people. I wish to know, also, what can be done to the established system of teaching that will ensure all children the opportunity to learn. First, that they have minds, and second, how to use those minds to bring spiritual and economic freedom. I am putting the question to you definitely enough, and since you have stressed the importance of definiteness of purpose, I am here and now putting you on notice that your answer to my question must be definite. A. Wait a moment while I catch my breath. You have given me quite an order. It seemed strange that you would come to the devil to learn how to live. I should think you would go to my opposition. Why don't you? Q. Your Majesty, it is you who are on trial here, not I. I want the truth and I am not particular as to the source from which I get it. There is something radically wrong with the system of education that has given us a balance sheet with life that shows us hopelessly in the red and groping for the road to self-determination as if we were so many animals lost in the jungle. I want to know 2 things about this system. First, what is the major weakness of the system? Second, how can this weakness be eliminated? The floor is yours again. Please stick to the question and stop trying to decoy me into the discussion of deep, abstract subjects. That's definite, is it not? A. You leave me no choice but that of direct answer. To begin with, the public school system approaches the subject of a doucation from the wrong angle. The school system endeavors to teach children to memorize facts, instead of teaching them how to use their own minds. Q. Is that all that is wrong with the system? A. No, that is only the beginning. Another major weakness of the school system is that it does not establish in the minds of children either the importance of definiteness of purpose or make any attempt to teach youths how to be definite about anything. The major object of all schooling is to force the students to cram their memories with facts instead of teaching them how to organize and make practical use of facts. This cramming system centers the attention of students on the accumulation of credits, but overlooks the important question of how to use knowledge in the practical affairs of life. This system turns out graduates whose names are inscribed upon parchment certificates, but whose minds are empty of self-determination. The school system got off to a bad start at the beginning. The schools began as institutions of higher learning, operated entirely for the select few whose wealth and family enticed them to education. Thus the entire school system was evolved by beginning at the top and working back down to the bottom. It is no wonder the system neglects to teach children the importance of definiteness of purpose when the system, itself, has literally evolved through indefiniteness. Q. What would correct this weakness of the public school system? Let's not complain of the weakness of the system unless we are prepared to offer a practical remedy with which it can be corrected. In other words, while we are discussing the importance of definiteness of plan and purpose, let us take our own medicine and be definite. A. Why don't you lay off the schools and churches and save yourself plenty of trouble? Don't you know that you are poking your nose into the affairs of the two forces that control the world? Suppose you do show up the schools and the churches as being weak and inadequate for the needs of human beings. What then? With what are you going to replace these two institutions? Q. Stop trying to evade my questions by the old trick of asking a counter question. I do not propose to replace the schools and churches. But I do propose to find out, if I can, how these organized forces can be modified so they will serve people instead of keeping them in ignorance. Go ahead, now, and give me a detailed catalog of all the changes in the public school system which would improve it. A. So you want the entire catalog, do you? Do you want the suggested changes in the order of their importance? This is another point at which the questioner forces the devil out of his comfort zone. It is amusing and instructive to witness this exchange, which provides a road map for improvement of our public schools. Q. Describe the changes needed just as they come to you. A. You are forcing me to commit an act of treason against myself, but here it is. Reverse the present system by giving children the privilege of leading in their school work instead of following orthodox rules designed only to impart abstract knowledge. Let instructors serve as students and let the students serve as instructors. As far as possible, organize all school work into definite methods through which the student can learn by doing, and direct the class work so that every student engages in some form of practical labor connected with the daily problems of life. Ideas are the beginning of all human achievement. Teach all students how to recognize practical ideas that may be of benefit in helping them acquire whatever they demand of life. Teach the students how to budget and use time, and above all teach the truth that time is the greatest asset available to human beings and the cheapest. Teach the student the basic motives by which all people are influenced and show how to use these motives in acquiring the necessities and the luxuries of life. Teach children what to eat, how much to eat, and what is the relationship between proper eating and sound health. Teach children the true nature and function of the emotion of sex, and above all, teach them that it can be transmuted into a driving force capable of lifting one to great heights of achievement. Teach children to be definite in all things, beginning with the choice of a definite major purpose in life. Teach children the nature of impossibilities for good and evil in the principle of habit, using as illustrations with which to dramatize the subject the everyday experiences of children and adults. Teach children how habits become fixed through the law of hypnotic rhythm, and influence them to adopt, while in the lower grades, habits that will lead to independent thought. Teach children the difference between temporary defeat and failure, and show them how to search for the seed of an equivalent advantage which comes with every defeat. Teach children to express their own thoughts fearlessly and to accept or reject, at will, all ideas of others, reserving to themselves, always, the privilege of relying upon their own judgment. Teach children to reach decisions promptly and to change them, if at all, slowly and with reluctance, and never without a definite reason. Teach children that the human brain is the instrument with which one receives, from the great storehouse of nature, the energy which is specialized into definite thoughts, that the brain does not think, but serves as an instrument for the interpretation of stimuli which cause thought. Teach children the value of harmony in their own minds and that this is attainable only through self-control. Teach children the nature and the value of self-control. Teach children that there is a law of increasing returns which can be and should be put into operation, as a matter of habit, by rendering always more service and better service than is expected of them. Teach children the true nature of the golden rule, and above all show them that through the operation of this principle, everything they do to and for another they do also to and for themselves. Teach children not to have opinions unless they are formed from facts or beliefs which may reasonably be accepted as facts. Teach children that cigarettes, liquor, narcotics, and overindulgence in sex destroy the power of will and lead to the habit of drifting. Do not forbid these evils, just explain them. Teach children the danger of believing anything merely because their parents, religious instructors, or someone else says it is so. Teach children to face facts, whether they are pleasant or unpleasant, without resorting to subterfuge or offering alibis. Teach children to encourage the use of their sixth sense through which ideas present themselves in their minds from unknown sources, and to examine all such ideas carefully. Teach children the full import of the law of compensation as it was interpreted by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and show them how the law works in the small, everyday affairs of life. Teach children that definiteness of purpose, backed by definite plans persistently and continuously applied, is the most efficacious form of prayer available to human beings. Teach children that the space they occupy in the world is measured definitely by the quality and quantity of useful service they render the world. Teach children there is no problem which does not have an appropriate solution and that the solution often may be found in the circumstance creating the problem. Teach children that their only real limitations are those which they set up or permit others to establish in their own minds. Teach them that man can achieve whatever man can conceive and believe. Teach children that all schoolhouses and all textbooks are elementary implements which may be helpful in the development of their minds, but that the only school of real value is the great university of life wherein one has the privilege of learning from experience. Teach children to be true to themselves at all times and, since they cannot please everybody, therefore to do a good job of pleasing themselves. Q. That is an imposing list, but it seems conspicuous by the fact it ignores practically every subject now taught in the public schools. Was that intended? A. Yes. You asked for a list of suggested changes in public school curricula which would benefit children. Well, that is what you got. Q. Some of the changes you suggest are so unorthodox they would shock most of the educators of today, wouldn't they? A. Most of the educators of today need to be shocked. A good sound shock often helps the brain that has been atrophied by habit. Q. Would the changes you suggest for the public schools give children immunity against the habit of drifting? A. Yes, that is one of the results that changes would bring, but there are others too. I can't say that I agree with each thing on the devil's list. However, when I stopped to analyze his list of recommendations, this question came to my mind. Isn't that what our schools should be teaching our children? The devil knew this and we didn't. I wish Hill had thought to ask why our schools are what they are and where they are or what and where they aren't. The great scholars who designed our system of schooling must have realized the importance of at least some of what the devil professed our schools should be teaching. Why aren't these things part of the system? How could the original architects of what is today our compulsory education system have been so far off target? The devil did make the claim that the school system is one of his primary vehicles for creating and sustaining his large army of drifters. Could it be? Q. How could the suggested changes be forced into the public school system? Of course, it is as difficult to get a new idea into an educator's brain as it is to interest a religious leader in modifying religion so it will help people to get more from life. Any of you who have tried to work to make changes in the public school system are probably nodding right now. A. The quickest and surest way to force practical ideas into the public schools is to first introduce the ideas through private schools and establish such a demand for their use that public school officials will be compelled to employ them. Q. Should any other changes be made in the public school system? A. Yes, many. Among other changes needed in all public school programs is the addition of a complete course of training in the psychology of harmonious negotiation between people. All children should be taught how to sell their way through life with the minimum amount of friction. Every public school should teach the principles of individual achievement through which one may attain a position of financial independence. Classes should be abolished altogether. They should be replaced by the round table or conference system such as businessmen employ. All students should receive individual instruction and guidance in connection with subjects which cannot be properly taught in groups. Every school should have an auxiliary group of instructors consisting of business and professional people, scientists, artists, engineers, and newspapermen, each of whom would impart to all the students a practical working knowledge of his own profession, business, or occupation. This instruction should be conducted through the conference system, to save the time of the instructors. Q. What you have suggested is, in effect, an auxiliary system of instruction that would give all school children a working knowledge of the practical affairs of life, direct from the original source. Is that the idea? A. You've stated it correctly. This is another subject that strikes close to home. My husband recalls that during the early 1970s in New Jersey, one of the organizations that he was involved with assembled group of scientists and businessmen to teach basic courses, for example, mathematics and physics in their fields as volunteers in the public schools, only to be told that since the scientists and businessmen were not professional teachers, they were not welcome. More recently, the mission of bringing practical teaching into the schools has been popularized by several groups, Teach for America, America Saves, Junior Achievement, but it is still often viewed as enhancement material and not part of the core curriculum. This and many other shifts in how content, context, principles, and skills are delivered to our children in our compulsory system of education need to be included as part of an interactive, experiential process that will determine how our children live their lives and what impact they will have on this complex world in which we live. The challenge is this: how do we package it all into a deliverable program that can be systematically and systemically implemented so it is success-oriented, rewarding, and fulfilling for all participants, children and adults alike? I am pleased and proud to say that I work with groups that have designed such programs, and they're taking these programs forward with definiteness of purpose. Their vision of the future, like ours, is to have an educational system that evolves into a powerful force, capable of producing self-motivated, independent thinking, self-reliant, contributing members of society. and capable also of producing something more important, future generations ready and able to work in a complex world, to live successfully, to take pleasure in empowering themselves and others, and to make a real and lasting difference in the world as informed, responsible, involved global citizens, each with definiteness of purpose. Q. Let us dismiss the public school system and go back to the churches for a moment. All my life I have heard clergymen preaching against sin and warning sinners to beware and repent so they could be saved. But I have never heard any of them tell me what sin is. Will you give me some light on this subject? A. Sin is anything one does or thinks which causes one to be unhappy. Human beings who are in sound physical and spiritual health should be at peace with themselves and always happy. Any form of mental or physical misery indicates the presence of sin. Q. Name some of the common forms of sin. A. It is a sin to overeat because that leads to ill health and misery. It is a sin to overindulge in sex because that breaks down one's willpower and leads to the habit of drifting. It is a sin to permit one's mind to be dominated by negative thoughts of envy, greed, fear, hatred, intolerance, vanity, self-pity, or discouragement, because these states of mind lead to the habit of drifting. Q. Is it a sin for one to drift through life, without definite aim, plan, or purpose? A. Yes, because this habit leads to poverty and destroys the privilege of self-determination. It also deprives one of the privilege of using his own mind as a medium of contact with infinite intelligence. Q. Are you the chief inspirer of sin? A. Yes. It is my business to gain control of the minds of people in every way possible. Q. Can you control the mind of a person who commits no sin? A. I cannot, because that person never permits his mind to be dominated by any form of negative thought. I cannot enter the mind of one who never sins, let alone control it. Q. What is the commonest and most destructive of all sins? A. Fear and ignorance. Q. Have you nothing else to add to the list? A. There is nothing else to be added. Q. What is faith? A. It is a state of mind wherein one recognizes and uses the power of positive thought as a medium by which one contacts and draws upon the universal store of infinite intelligence at will. Q. In other words, faith is the absence of all forms of negative thought. Is that the idea? A. Yes, that is another way of describing it. Q. Has a drifter the capacity to use faith? A. He may have the capacity but he does not use it. Everyone has the potential power to clear his mind of all negative thoughts and thereby avail himself of the power of faith. Q. Stating the matter in another way, faith is definiteness of purpose backed by belief in the attainment of the object of that purpose. Is that correct? A. That's the idea, exactly. Faith is a state of mind wherein one recognizes and uses the power of positive thought as a medium by which one contacts and draws upon the universal store of infinite intelligence at will. Hill succinctly sums up the definition. Faith is definiteness of purpose backed by belief in the attainment of the object of that purpose. Chapter 10. Self-discipline. Q. What preparation must one undergo before being able to move with definiteness of purpose at all times? A. One must gain mastery over self. This is the second of the 7 principles. The person who is not master of himself can never be master of others. Lack of self-mastery is, of itself, the most destructive form of indefiniteness. The person who is not master of himself can never be master of others. How true this is. Think of our political leaders.